I woke up to the taste of burnt plastic and a tube in my throat. The first words I heard were not that I was safe. Instead, a paramedic whispered that my husband claimed I did this to myself. Yet he had told them a different story entirely. Right then, I understood. My twins' massive 25th birthday bash was not just a snub. It was a smokescreen designed to end me quietly so they could narrate my death. My name is Victoria Hayes, and for a terrifying span of 40 minutes tonight, I was dead to the world. The first thing that returned was not my vision or my memory, but a phantom taste of sulfur and melted plastic coating the back of my throat. It was the taste of air that had turned poisonous. My lungs felt like they had been scrubbed with steel wool, raw and burning with every shallow intake of breath. I tried to cough, but my body refused to obey the command. There was a tube down my throat. My hands were heavy, pinned to the sides of a narrow bed by gravity and exhaustion. Victoria Hayes, female, 25, stabilizing, a voice said. It was detached, clinical, the voice of a man reading a grocery list. I forced my eyes open. The harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room stabbed at my retinas, forcing me to blink rapidly. The world was a blur of white tiles and silver machinery. The rhythmic beeping of a cardiac monitor was the only thing anchoring me to the present moment. I was alive. The realization was not a relief. It was a shock. A face swam into view above me. It was a paramedic, his uniform stained with something dark near the shoulder. He was looking at me, but his expression was devoid of the usual sympathy one expects when waking up in a trauma bay. He looked annoyed. He looked skeptical. "You are lucky, Mrs. Hayes," he said flatly. He reached out and adjusted the flow on the oxygen mask that had replaced the intubation tube moments before I fully regained consciousness. Another 10 minutes and the carbon monoxide levels in your blood would have caused permanent brain damage or death. I tried to speak, to ask what happened, but all that came out was a dry, rasping croak. He handed me a plastic cup of water with a straw, his movements efficient but rough. "Save your breath," he told me. We almost did not hurry. The sentence hung in the air between us, colder than the sterile room. I pulled the mask down, ignoring the protest of my burning throat. "What?" I rasped. "Why?" The paramedic glanced at the nurse charting near the door, then leaned in closer. His eyes narrowed. "Because of the call. The dispatch note said to take our time. It said the subject you was intoxicated, prone to hysterics, and likely staging a scene for attention. Code 2 response, no sirens." The room seemed to tilt. Staging a scene. Hysterics. These were words that had been weaponized against me my entire life, but hearing them here, in a place of life and death, felt like a physical blow. "Who?" I managed to ask. "Who called?" He looked at his clipboard, flipping a page with a snap of his wrist. "The caller identified himself as your husband, Felix Whitmere." The name hit me harder than the lack of oxygen. Felix, my Felix, the man who had held me when I cried over my grandmother's stroke. The man who had promised to stand between me and the shark tank that was my family. "No," I whispered. My heart rate monitor spiked, the beeping becoming a frantic tempo that echoed my rising panic. "He would not—" "It is in the log, Mrs. Hayes," the paramedic said, turning away to check the IV line in my arm. "He said you were upset about a party. Said not to waste resources." I closed my eyes, the betrayal searing hotter than the headache pounding behind my temples. A party. My twin sister's 25th birthday party. The one happening right now in Waverly Hills. The one I was explicitly disinvited from. Suddenly, the curtain to my cubicle was ripped back. The sound of metal rings sliding on the track was violent enough to make me jump. Victoria. It was Felix. He looked like a man who had run through a war zone. His tuxedo shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his bow tie gone, his face an ashen mask of pure terror. He rushed to the bedside, his hands hovering over me as if he was afraid that touching me would cause me to shatter. "Get away from her," the nurse snapped, stepping between us. "She is my wife," Felix yelled, his voice cracking. He looked at me, his eyes wide and wet. "Tori, oh God, I thought I lost you. I thought I was too late." I looked at him, searching for the lie. I looked for the coldness the paramedic had described, the dismissive husband who told them to take their time. I saw only panic. "You called them," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You told them I was faking it." Felix froze. The color drained from his face so completely I thought he might faint. "What? No, Victoria. Listen to me. I called 911 the second I got the alert." "The paramedic said you told them I was drunk," I said, accusing him, hating how weak I sounded, that I was being dramatic. "I never said that." Felix grabbed the bed rail, his knuckles white. "I was at the party. I got a notification from the doorbell camera. It went offline, then reconnected, and I saw the smoke detector light flashing in the hallway reflection. I called emergency services immediately. I told them there was a gas leak. I screamed at them to hurry. I drove here doing 100 miles an hour." He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He tapped the screen and shoved it toward my face. Look at the call log. Look at the time, 7:42 p.m., duration, 45 seconds. I was begging them to break the door down. I stared at the screen. The time matched, but the paramedic's words were still ringing in my ears. The paramedic, who had been watching us from the corner, stepped forward. He looked from Felix to me, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion. "Sir, we received a call at 7:35, 7 minutes before yours. The caller ID was spoofed, but the man identified himself as Felix Whitmere. He gave the address. He gave the apartment code." Felix stared at the man, horror dawning in his eyes. That was not me. My phone was in my jacket pocket. I was taking photos with Lorraine and Martin. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. 2 calls, one to save me, and one to ensure the rescuers arrived too late to do anything but zip up the body bag. A young technician, who had been silently adjusting the monitor leads on my chest, leaned in close to my ear while checking my blood pressure. She was young, maybe my age, with sharp eyes that had seen too much of the city's cruelty. "There is more," she murmured, so low that only I could hear. Dispatch got a second call while the rig was en route. A woman this time, said she was family. She wanted to know which hospital they would take a psychiatric hold to. She was not asking about your health, honey. She was trying to steer the investigation before we even got your pulse back. The cold that washed over me had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. It was a visceral, bone-deep chill that started in my marrow. My mind flashed back to earlier today, the morning of my 25th birthday, the silence of my phone, the empty apartment, and then the single notification that had lit up my screen around noon, a text message from my mother. Lorraine. I closed my eyes and I could see the pixels clearly, burning behind my eyelids. Stay home. Nobody wants you there. That was it. No happy birthday. No explanation. Just a command and a cruelty wrapped in one sentence. I had obeyed. I had stayed home. I had bought myself a cupcake from the bakery on 4th Street and sat on my kitchen floor, trying to convince myself that I did not care. And while I sat there, feeling sorry for myself, someone had been busy. I looked at Felix. He was arguing with the nurse now, demanding to see the toxicology report, demanding police presence. He was not the enemy, but his name had been used as a weapon. "Felix," I said. My voice was stronger this time, harder. He stopped mid-sentence and turned to me. "I am here. Tori, I am right here." "Show me the smart home logs," I commanded. "What?" "The house system? The app? Show me the activity log for the last 2 hours." He fumbled with his phone again, unlocking it and navigating to the security application. He handed it to me. My vision was still blurry at the edges, but I forced my eyes to focus on the small text. 1915, HV, AC, System Manual Override. 1915, CO Detector. Disabled User Admin. 1920, Kitchen Gas Range, High Flow Detected. "Who logged in?" I asked, pointing at the entry for the CO detector. That requires an admin password. Felix looked at the screen, and I saw the moment his heart broke. It says, user Lorraine_guest, but your mom has not had access since we changed the router last year. She never needed the router, I said, my voice turning into ice. She needed the master account, the one she set up when we moved in, and she insisted on paying for the installation as a housewarming gift. I scrolled down. Just before the sensors were disabled, there was a login location stamp. Login source IP, address 192.168.1.55. Device iPhone 15 Pro Max. Location: the estate at Waverly Hills. Main ballroom guest Wi-Fi. The party. I let the phone drop onto the sheets. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a car crash. The party was not just a celebration for my twin sister, Cassandra. It was not just a social snub to keep the black sheep of the family away. It was a stage, a brightly lit, crowded, noisy stage where everyone I was related to could be seen, photographed, and tagged on social media at the exact moment I was suffocating on my kitchen floor. If I had died, the narrative was already written. The unstable daughter, the one who was always sensitive, the one who couldn't handle her sister's success, a tragic accident, or perhaps a cry for help gone wrong. Felix would be the grieving widower, confused and broken. My mother would be the stoic matriarch, bearing yet another tragedy. Cassandra would cry beautifully at the funeral, dabbing her eyes with a designer handkerchief, the spotlight firmly back on her where she believed it belonged. The fake call from Felix was the insurance policy. It established a precedent of hysteria. It told the first responders, she does this. Do not believe the evidence. Do not look too closely. And the call from the woman asking about a psychiatric hold, that was the contingency plan. If I survived, they needed me committed. They needed me labeled crazy before I could open my mouth. Tori. Felix touched my hand. His fingers were trembling. What does it mean? Who did this? I looked at the tube attached to my arm, pumping saline and fluids into my veins. I listened to the hiss of the oxygen. I felt the rawness in my throat where the poisonous air had tried to burn me out of existence. They wanted me gone. My own blood wanted me erased. I thought about my grandmother, Delilah, lying in her hospital bed 5 weeks ago, helpless while Lorraine circled like a vulture discussing trusts and medical proxies. I thought about the way Cassandra had looked at me during the last family dinner, her eyes scanning me like I was a stain on the tablecloth. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the emotional one, the one who crumbled under pressure. They thought that by leaving me alone in the dark, I would fade away. They were wrong. I gripped Felix's hand. I squeezed it hard enough to turn his knuckles white, hard enough to ground us both in the reality of the violence that had just been visited upon me. Nobody, I said. Felix blinked. What? Tell the police nobody entered the apartment, I said, formulating the plan as I spoke. Tell them it must have been a malfunction, a glitch. Victoria, are you insane? Someone tried to kill you. We have the logs. If we show them the logs now, Lorraine will say her account was hacked, I said, my mind working faster than it ever had before. She will say she lost her phone at the party. She will have 5 witnesses who swear she was making a toast when the login happened. We cannot win with just this. I pulled myself up, ignoring the dizziness that swirled around me. They think I am either dead or broken. They think the narrative is theirs. I looked Felix dead in the eye. Let them believe it. I do not understand, Felix stammered. The party is still going on. Is it not? I asked. It is barely 9 o'clock. Yes, but... Go back, I said. No. He recoiled as if I had slapped him. I am not leaving you here. You have to, I insisted. Go back. Be the panicked husband. Tell them there was an accident. Tell them I am in critical condition. Tell them the doctors are not sure if I will wake up. I saw the understanding slowly dawn on him. It was a terrifying thing to ask of a man who loved me. But I needed him to be my soldier now, not just my husband. "You want me to lie to them," he stated. "I want you to feed them the story they want to hear," I corrected. "I want to see who relaxes when they think I am brain dead. I want to see who calls the lawyer first. I want to see who smiles when they think no one is watching." I reached up and touched the oxygen mask, sliding it back over my face. The plastic smelled foul, but the air coming through it was clean. It was the fuel I needed. "They tried to end my story tonight. Felix," I said, my voice muffled by the mask but steel hard. "But they made a mistake. They didn't finish the job. And now, I am going to write the ending." I lay back against the pillows, the exhaustion finally dragging at my eyelids. But the fear was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve that settled in my chest like a stone. I would recover, I would breathe, and then I would tear their perfect little lives apart, brick by gilded brick. "Go," I commanded him, "and do not trust a single soul in that ballroom." Felix hesitated for 1 second more, then nodded once, his jaw setting. He turned and walked out of the ER bay, his tuxedo jacket flapping behind him like a dark cape. I watched him go, then turned my head to stare at the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. It was the countdown. My sister's birthday party was about to get a very unexpected party favor a ghost, and I was going to haunt them until they screamed. 5 weeks before I woke up with a tube in my throat. I was dying a different kind of death. It was the slow, beige, fluorescent-lit death of a Tuesday afternoon shift at the Crown Ridge Civic Records Bureau. If you have never stood in line at a municipal office in a mid-sized American city, you cannot truly understand the texture of purgatory. The air always smells of stale coffee and photocopier toner. The carpet is an industrial weave that was probably gray 20 years ago, but has since surrendered to a shade of despair. My job was to sit behind a plexiglass barrier, a relic from the pandemic that nobody had bothered to remove, and tell angry people that they had filled out Form 104B incorrectly. It was 3 p.m. I was explaining to a man in a faded baseball cap that a property lien did not just disappear because he wished it away. He was yelling. I was nodding, my face arranged in a mask of professional patience that I had perfected over 3 years of working here. This job was not glamorous. It did not pay enough to afford a lifestyle in Waverly Hills, which was exactly why I liked it. It was mine. It was boring, predictable, and remarkably free of the drama that clung to the Hayes family name like barnacles on a ship hull. Then the phone on my desk rang. Not the internal line, but my personal cell phone, vibrating against the laminate surface. I glanced down. The screen displayed the contact name Ashgrove Medical Pavilion. My stomach dropped so fast I felt physical vertigo. My grandmother, Delilah Hartwell, had been complaining of headaches for a week, but she was the kind of woman who treated illness as a personal failing, something to be ignored until it went away. She did not go to doctors. If a hospital was calling me, the world had already tilted off its axis. I ignored the man in the baseball cap. I picked up the phone. "This is Victoria Hayes," I said. "Ms. Hayes, this is Dr. Eris Thorne from the emergency department at Ashgrove," a voice said. It was calm, practiced, the voice of someone who delivered bad news 20 times a day. "Your grandmother, Delilah Hartwell, has been admitted. She suffered a massive hemorrhagic stroke at her home. You are listed as her emergency contact." I did not hear the rest of his sentence. The sounds of the office, the hum of the printer, the angry muttering of the man in the cap, the ringing of other phones all receded into a dull roar, like I was underwater. "I am on my way," I said. I grabbed my purse. I did not log out of my computer. I did not tell my supervisor I was leaving. I simply walked out the double glass doors, got into my 7-year-old sedan, and drove. The drive to Ashgrove usually took 30 minutes. That afternoon, in the thick of the pre-rush hour congestion, it felt like a lifetime. The highway was a river of red brake lights. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My mind replaying the last conversation I had with Nana. It had been Sunday. We had eaten lemon cake. She had told me she was thinking of changing her garden layout. I had not kissed her cheek when I left. I had just waved. Please do not let that wave be the last thing. I prayed. I was not a religious woman, but panic makes converts of us all. When I finally ran through the sliding doors of the Ashgrove Medical Pavilion, I was sweating and breathless. The air inside was freezing, scrubbed clean of all organic scent, replaced by the sharp, chemical bite of antiseptic and floor wax. I found her in the neuro ICU, room 412. Delilah Hartwell had always been a force of nature. She was a woman who stood 5 feet 10 inches tall, even in her 70s. She had a voice that could command a room and a laugh that could shatter tension. But the woman in the bed was not Delilah. She was a small, broken shape under a thin white sheet. Her face was slack on one side, pulled down by gravity and the misfiring of nerves. Her silver hair, usually pinned up in a perfect French twist, was matted against the pillow. Wires snaked from her chest to a tower of monitors that blinked and chirped with a terrifying, rhythmic indifference. "Nana," I whispered. I approached the bed slowly, afraid that the vibration of my footsteps might disturb the fragile thread holding her to this world. I reached out and took her hand. It was cold, not cool, but cold the temperature of an object that has been left in a drafty room. "I am here," I said, my voice cracking. "Victoria is here." There was no squeeze back, no flutter of eyelids. Just the mechanical swoosh hiss of the ventilator assisting her breathing. I stood there for 20 minutes, alone. In those 20 minutes, I allowed myself to cry. I wiped the tears away quickly, though, because I knew the peace would not last. I knew who was coming. The door to the ICU room swung open with a confidence that felt out of place in a room full of dying people. My mother, Lorraine Hayes, walked in. She did not look like a woman who had just heard her mother was in a coma. She looked like she was arriving at a board meeting or a gallery opening. She was wearing a tailored charcoal blazer and matching trousers, her hair blown out into a sleek, immovable helmet of blonde. A waft of expensive floral perfume, something heavy with jasmine and tuberose, drifted into the sterile room, instantly choking out the clean smell of the hospital. She stopped at the foot of the bed. She looked at her mother. She did not flinch. She did not gasp. Her face remained a perfect, smooth mask of polite concern. "Victoria." She acknowledged me without looking at me. "You got here fast." "I left work," I said. Lorraine nodded absently. She turned to the nurse who was adjusting the drip on the IV pole. "Excuse me, has the attending physician released the preliminary prognosis report yet? We need to know the extent of the cognitive deficit. Not is she going to live, not is she in pain. She wanted to know about the deficit. She wanted to know if the brain was still working enough to sign things. The doctor will be in shortly to speak with the family," the nurse said. Her tone cool. Nurses always knew. They could smell the difference between grief and greed. Before I could say anything, the door opened again. My father, Martin, shuffled in, followed closely by my twin sister, Cassandra. Martin looked at the floor. He always looked at the floor, or the wall, or a point 3 inches to the left of your ear. He was a tall man who had spent 30 years shrinking himself to fit into the space Lorraine allowed him. He mumbled a greeting to me, then retreated to the corner of the room, folding his arms as if trying to make himself invisible. And then there was Cass. My sister was wearing a pastel yoga set with an oversized trench coat thrown over it. Looking effortlessly chic, she had her phone in her hand. The screen was lit up. As she walked toward the bed, I saw her thumb hovering over the record button. "Oh my God," Cass breathed out. Her voice was thick with emotion, trembling just the right amount. "Nana." She reached out and touched the bed rail. Posing her hand so the light caught her engagement ring, she looked at the camera lens, then at our grandmother, then back at the camera. A perfect triangle of tragedy. "Please stop," I said. My voice sounded harsh in the quiet room. "Cass, put the phone away." Cass looked up at me, her eyes wide and innocent. "I am just updating the family group chat. Tori, cousin Sarah, is worried sick. Why do you always have to assume the worst?" "You are filming a story," I accused her. "I can see the interface. Girls, Lorraine said sharply. She did not raise her voice, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Not now. We have business to discuss. Business. I stepped away from the bed, placing myself between them and our grandmother. She has been in a coma for less than 4 hours. What business could we possibly have? Lorraine sighed, the sound of a parent dealing with a slow-witted child. She opened her designer handbag and pulled out a sleek leather folder. The trust, Victoria, the estate management. If Mother is incapacitated, we need to establish who holds the medical proxy and the power of attorney immediately. Decisions have to be made about her care. Expensive decisions. I felt a cold prickle of dread at the base of my neck. I knew my grandmother's wishes. We had talked about it 100 times over tea and late-night movies. She did not trust Lorraine with her money, and she certainly did not trust her with her life. I am the proxy, I said. Nana told me she filed the paperwork last year. Lorraine raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Did she? Because we have been looking through her files at the house, and we cannot seem to find a certified copy, and given the situation, the hospital defaults to the next of kin. That is me. She did not want you to make these decisions, I said, my voice rising. She knew you would put her in a home the second she became inconvenient. Lower your voice, Martin whispered from the corner. Though he did not step forward to support me. I am just being practical, Lorraine said, smoothing the front of her blazer. Ashgrove is a private facility. The daily rate here is astronomical. If she is going to be in a vegetative state, we need to move her to a long-term care facility that is more sustainable. We need to preserve the principle of the estate for the future. For the future? I laughed. A bitter, jagged sound. You mean for yourself? I mean for the family, Lorraine corrected, her eyes hardening. Something you seem to care very little about. I care about her. I pointed at the frail woman in the bed. I am the one who drives her to her appointments. I am the one who buys her groceries. I am the one who knows she hates the sound of news programs and loves classical guitar. You visit her twice a year on holidays when you need a photo op. And look where that got her, Cass chimed in. She had pocketed her phone but was watching the exchange with a detached curiosity, like she was watching a reality show. Maybe if you had been paying closer attention, you would have noticed the signs of a stroke earlier. Tori, the accusation hit me like a physical slap. I stopped breathing for a second. That is unfair, I whispered. Is it? Lorraine asked. She stepped closer to me. She smelled of jasmine and venom. Cassandra is right. You are emotional. Victoria, you always have been. You get hysterical. You panic. We cannot have someone with your temperament making life or death decisions. She looked at my father. Martin, tell her. Martin cleared his throat. He looked at his shoes. Victoria, honey, maybe your mother is right. You look exhausted. You are shaking. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, but they were trembling from rage, not weakness. I want to be the medical proxy, I stated, trying to keep my voice steady. I will petition the hospital ethics board if I have to. I know she named me. Lorraine smiled. It was a small, tight smile that did not reach her eyes. It was the smile of a shark that has just scented blood in the water. We will see what the lawyers say about that, she said softly. But frankly, Victoria, nobody is going to grant power of attorney to a girl who works as a filing clerk and can barely pay her own rent. Cass is a vice president at a PR firm. She is stable. She is married to a successful man. She presents as competent. You present as, well, you. She gestured vaguely at my wrinkled work clothes, my messy hair, my tear-stained face. I am her granddaughter, I said. I love her. Love does not pay the bills, Lorraine said, turning her back on me. And it certainly does not manage a $3 million trust fund. The doctor walked in then. Looking harried and carrying a tablet, Lorraine's demeanor shifted instantly. Her posture straightened. Her face softened into an expression of brave, tragic hope. Doctor, she said, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "Please tell us there is hope. We are just devastated." I watched her perform. I watched Cass lean into Martin, wiping a dry eye. They were a tableau of a grieving family, and I was standing on the outside, vibrating with an anger so potent it felt like poison in my veins. I walked back to the bedside. I tuned out the doctor's explanation of intracranial pressure and surgical options. I tuned out Lorraine's sharp questions about recovery times and insurance caps. I took Delilah's hand again. It felt even colder than before. I leaned down, putting my lips close to her ear, hoping that somewhere in the dark, she could still hear me. "Wake up, Nana," I whispered. "Please wake up, because if you do not, they are going to bury us both." As I stood there, listening to the beep of the monitor, I felt a heavy gaze on my back. I turned slightly. Cass was watching me. She was not looking at Nana. She was looking at me, her eyes calculating, cold, and utterly devoid of grief. In that moment, under the harsh white lights of the ICU, I realized something terrifying. They were not just waiting for Delilah to die. They were banking on it. Her death was the key to the vault they had been trying to crack for years, and I was the only thing standing in their way. I squeezed my grandmother's hand, desperate for a sign, a twitch, anything. But there was nothing. Just the silence of the machine, and the heavy, suffocating pressure of my family closing in around me. I did not know it then, but the clock had already started ticking. This was not just a medical crisis. This was the opening move of a war, and standing there in my cheap cardigan and sensible shoes, I was woefully unarmed. The preparation for the execution began not with a weapon, but with a floral arrangement. 2 weeks before our shared 25th birthday, I stopped by my parents' estate in Waverly Hills to drop off some of Nana's mail that had been routed to my apartment by mistake. The driveway was blocked by a white van from a luxury event planning company. Men in jumpsuits were unloading crates of hydrangeas and constructing what looked like the skeletal frame of a cathedral in the backyard. I found my mother, Lorraine, standing on the patio, holding a tablet and directing the placement of a portable dance floor. She looked vibrant, energized by the prospect of hosting a stark contrast to the grieving daughter she played so well at the hospital. "Move the DJ booth to the east," she was shouting at a technician. "I do not want the bass rattling the windows during the toasts." I stood there for a moment, holding the stack of Nana's utility bills, feeling that old familiar ache of invisibility. It was going to be a massive event, the kind of party that made the local society pages. "Hi, Mom," I said. She turned, her eyes scanning me for flaws before settling on my face. "Victoria, you are early, or late. I forget when you were supposed to come." "I just came to drop these off," I said, handing her the mail. I looked past her at the rising tent. "The setup looks intense. Is this for the annual charity gala?" Lorraine laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Don't be silly. It is for the birthday. 25 is a milestone year. We have the mayor coming, and the frantic PR team from Cass's firm. It has to be perfect." The birthday, singular. I felt a tightness in my chest. We were twins. We had come into the world 7 minutes apart. Every birthday of our childhood had been shared. 2 cakes, 2 piles of presents, forced coordination. "Right," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I was wondering about that. Since it is, my birthday too. Are we doing a joint thing? Do you need me to invite anyone?" Lorraine looked at me with genuine confusion, as if I had just asked if I could fly the space shuttle. "Oh, Victoria," she sighed, putting a hand on my shoulder. It was a heavy, patronizing touch. "You know you hate these things. Crowds, loud music, people asking questions about your job. It always makes you so anxious. I did not want to put you through that stress." "I do not mind parties," I lied. "It is my 25th birthday too, Mom. And we will celebrate it," she promised, her eyes already drifting back to the caterer. "Maybe a nice quiet lunch next month, just the family, when things calm down with Nana. But this," she swept her hand toward the manicured lawn. This is for Cassandra. She needs this for her networking. It is professional as much as personal. You understand? I understood perfectly. I was the rough draft. Cassandra was the final print. I walked back to my car, my face burning. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself I preferred a quiet life, but rejection, no matter how often it happens, never actually creates a callus. It just bruises the same tender spot over and over again. The real blow came 3 days before the date. I had texted Lorraine to ask about the timeline. Even if it was Cassandra's party, I assumed I was expected to attend. I was family. My absence would be more conspicuous than my presence. I asked if I should arrive early to help with setup, or if there was a dress code I needed to adhere to. The response came 4 hours later. I was sitting at my kitchen island, stirring sugar into lukewarm tea. My phone buzzed. It was a single text message from Lorraine. Stay home. Nobody wants you there. I stared at the screen. I read it again. I checked the sender name, thinking it must be a mistake, a wrong number, a joke. But it was her. It was not. Maybe it is best if you skip it. It was not. We are keeping the guest list tight. It was a direct, brutal command, followed by a statement of fact. Nobody wants you there. I put the phone down. I felt a tear slide down my nose and splash onto the counter. But I wiped it away furiously. I would not cry over a party. I would not cry over people who could type that sentence and then go to sleep soundly. When Felix came home that evening, I showed him the message. He read it, his brow furrowing, his jaw working as he read the words. This is insane. Tori? Is she drunk? She does not drink on weekdays, I said. She means it. I am calling her, Felix said, reaching for his phone. This is ridiculous. It is your birthday. You are her daughter. You are going? No, I said, grabbing his wrist. Please, do not beg her. If I go after getting this, I am just pathetic. I have some pride left. I am not going then, Felix declared, tossing his phone onto the sofa. If you are not welcome, neither am I. We will go out. We will go to that steakhouse you like downtown. To hell with them. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to hoard my husband to myself and let them explain to their high society guests why the son-in-law was missing. But the next day, Lorraine called Felix while he was at work. I do not know exactly what was said, but when he came home, he looked defeated. She says it is going to look terrible if I am not there, Felix admitted, looking guilty. She said Martin is going to be asking for me. She said if I do not show up, she is going to tell the family that you forbade me from coming, that you are controlling me. So she twists it either way, I said. I will just go for an hour. Felix pleaded. I will show my face, shake Martin's hand, give Cass a card, and then I will fake a headache. I will be back here by 8 o'clock. We can still do our own thing. Please, Tori, it keeps the peace. Okay, I said quietly. Go. It was the path of least resistance, and in the Hayes family, the path of least resistance was the only one that did not lead to a landmine. Then came the voice note from Cassandra. It arrived the night before our birthday. I saw the notification and hesitated before pressing play. Cass never called unless she wanted something. Her voice filled my quiet apartment, smooth and syrupy, with that slight vocal fry that was trendy among her circle. Hey, sissy. Happy almost birthday. Mom told me you decided to sit this one out. Honestly, good for you. You have looked so tired lately, like really pale and fragile. Just rest. Okay, don't worry about anything. We will miss you. But everyone understands that you are going through a rough patch. Love you. I replayed it, decided to sit this one out, as if it were my choice. Rough patch. As if I were mentally unstable. The tone was sweet, but the subtext was a knife. She was establishing a narrative. To anyone who asked where Victoria was, the answer would be, she is not well. She is fragile. She needed to be alone. It was gaslighting. Recorded and delivered in high-definition audio. The morning of my 25th birthday broke gray and rainy. I woke up at 7 o'clock. The apartment was silent. Felix had already left for work. He had a morning meeting he could not move. There was a note on the counter, "Happy birthday. My love. Tonight is ours. I promise," and a small box containing a silver bracelet. It was sweet. It was genuine. But as I scrolled through my phone, the silence from the rest of the world was deafening. No texts from Martin. No texts from my cousins. No texts from the aunt, who always sent generic e-cards. The stay-home order seemed to have included a gag order for the rest of the family. I got dressed. I put on jeans and a sweater. I did not want to cook breakfast. I needed to get out of the apartment, to be among people who did not know that nobody wanted me. I walked 3 blocks to a small bakery on 4th Street. It was not the kind of place my mother would frequent. It sold day-old muffins and coffee in styrofoam cups. "1 vanilla cupcake, please," I told the girl at the counter. She looked bored. She did not know it was my birthday. $4, she said. I sat at a wobbly metal table in the corner. I peeled the paper wrapper off the cupcake. I had brought a single candle in my pocket, a small, blue-striped one left over from a box I bought years ago. I stuck the candle into the frosting. I lit it with a match from the bowl on the counter. The tiny flame flickered in the draft from the door. Happy birthday to me. I thought, happy birthday to the invisible twin. I did not make a wish. Wishes felt childish. Instead, I made a promise to myself. Next year, I will be nowhere near these people. I blew out the candle. The smoke curled up, thin and gray, and vanished. By 6 o'clock that evening, the internet was flooded. I sat on my sofa, wrapped in a blanket, torturing myself with the scroll. The hashtag Cast25 was trending locally. There was the tent, glowing with fairy lights like an enchanted castle. There was the champagne tower, 6 feet tall. There was the band, a 7-piece ensemble in white tuxedos, and there was Cassandra. She looked stunning. I had to admit, she was wearing a silver gown that looked like liquid mercury, holding a glass of champagne, her head thrown back in laughter. The caption on her main post read, "Quarter of a century. So blessed to be surrounded by everyone I love. My heart is full. Everyone I love." I zoomed in on the photo. I saw my mother in the background, beaming, holding court with the mayor. I saw my father, looking uncomfortable in a tuxedo but present. I saw cousins I hadn't seen in 3 years. I was not just missing, I was erased. If you looked at this feed, Victoria Hayes did not exist. I was a ghost they had exorcised from the family portrait. Then I saw Felix. He was in the background of a video story posted by one of Cass's friends. He looked miserable. He was checking his watch. He was standing near the exit, clearly trying to escape. I felt a surge of affection for him. He was trying. At 7 o'clock, my phone rang. It was him. "Hey," he said, and I could hear the thumping bass of the music in the background. "Tori, I am so sorry. I am trying to leave." "It is okay," I said, though the loneliness was starting to feel like a physical weight. "Just come home when you can. I ordered pizza." "I am walking to the car now," he said. "Lorraine just cornered me. She wants to do a family photo for the newsletter or something. She says I cannot leave until the photographer sets up the lighting." "Tell her no," I said. "Tell her you have a wife waiting at home." "I did." Felix sounded frustrated. She said, "Don't be selfish. Felix, it will take 10 minutes. And Martin actually grabbed my arm. He looks panicked. "Tori, he asked me to stay close to him. I think he is afraid to be left alone with Lorraine's friends." "Fine," I sighed. 10 minutes. But then you run. I promise. I will be there by 7:45. I love you. Love you too. I hung up. The apartment felt too quiet. The silence was heavy, oppressive. I had expected to feel angry, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of fighting for a seat at a table where the chairs were bolted to the floor. I went into the kitchen to pour a glass of water. That was when my phone pinged with an email notification. It was not a text. It was an automated alert from our smart home system. System alert. Safety protocol reset. I frowned. We had not touched the safety settings in months. I opened the app. 7:15 p.m. carbon monoxide detector. Status disabled by admin. 7:15 p.m. VAC ventilation. Status manual override / recirculate. I stared at the screen. Why would the CO detector be disabled? A strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't panic. Not yet. It was confusion. Logic tried to fill the gaps. Maybe it was a firmware update. Maybe the power grid surge from the storm last week had glitched the hub. But then I remembered the text. Stay home. I remembered the voice note. You look so pale. And I remembered Felix, currently pinned down at a party 10 miles away, surrounded by witnesses, forced into a photo op that would prove exactly where he was at this specific moment. I stood in the middle of my kitchen. The air was still. The only sound was the refrigerator humming, and then, faintly, beneath the hum, I heard a small, sharp click from the gas range, not the click of the igniter sparking, but the soft hiss of a valve opening without a flame. I looked at the stove. The knobs were all in the off position, but the smell faint, metallic, like heated copper wire was starting to drift through the room. It was 7:20, I was alone, and the house, my sanctuary, had just taken a breath. The box had arrived on the morning of our birthday, hours before the command to stay home and the subsequent isolation. It was delivered by a private courier, not the usual postal service. The packaging was sleek, matte black with silver embossing, the kind of unboxing experience reserved for high-end electronics. Inside sat a sculptural device that looked more like a piece of modern art than an appliance, the EtherFlow smart air purifier and heater. Nestled on top was a card made of thick, cream-colored stock. Tori. I know things have been strained. I hate that you are spending our birthday alone. I want us to have a fresh start this year. Please use this. It helps with anxiety and sleep. I just want you to be healthy. Love. Cass. I had stared at the card for a long time. The sentiment was perfect. It was the kind of note a loving sister would write. But the handwriting was wrong. Cassandra wrote in a jagged, hurried scrawl, the penmanship of someone whose thoughts always moved faster than her hand. The letters on this card were rounded, looped, and deliberate. It looked like the handwriting of a woman who had practiced the sentence 10 times before committing ink to paper, or perhaps it was not her handwriting at all. You are overthinking it, Felix had said when he inspected it before leaving for work. He had turned the device over in his hands, checking the heavy braided cord and the serial number sticker. It has a warranty seal. Tori. It is brand new. Maybe she asked her assistant to write the card. It is a nice gesture, $1,000 gesture. I had wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that despite the public exclusion from the party, there was a private channel of affection remaining. So, I had placed the device on the counter between the living room and the kitchen. Now, hours later, with the apartment silent and the ominous notification from the smart home system glowing on my phone, I looked at that sleek black tower again. The apartment was freezing. The AC system, according to the alert I had just received, was set to recirculate, and the temperature had been dropped remotely. Shivering, I reached out and tapped the capacitive power button on Cass's gift. It hummed to life instantly. A soft, blue ring of light appeared at the base. A stream of warm air began to push into the room. At least one thing works, I muttered to the empty room. I turned back to the kitchen to investigate the faint clicking sound I had heard earlier. The gas stove looked innocent enough. The knobs were all vertical, pointing to the off position. I leaned in close to the burners. Sniffing, there was no smell of rotten eggs, no mercaptan. I stood up, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. I was being paranoid. The text message from my mother, the exclusion, the loneliness, it had all combined to make me jump at shadows. The safety protocol reset notification was probably just a glitch, a software hiccup caused by the same storm that had flickered the lights last week. I went back to the sofa and pulled my knees to my chest, letting the warm air from the new heater wash over me. It felt good. It felt safe. 10 minutes passed. The headache started at the base of my skull. It was not a sharp pain, but a dull, heavy pressure, as if someone were inflating a balloon inside my neck. I rubbed my temples, assuming it was the stress crying I had suppressed all day finally demanding its due. Then came the nausea. It rolled over me in a slow, sickening wave. I swallowed hard, tasting bile. I need water. I tried to stand up. The world did not just spin. It tilted violently sideways. My knees buckled, and I fell back onto the cushions. My limbs felt impossibly heavy, as if my blood had been replaced with mercury. What is wrong with me? I looked at the heater. The blue light was pulsing now, a slow, rhythmic beat. The air coming from it smelled strange. It did not smell like ozone or fresh linen. It smelled hot. It smelled like dust burning on an old radiator, but sharper, metallic, like a copper penny held over a lighter. Click. The sound came from the kitchen again, louder this time. I forced my head to turn. My vision was swimming, the edges of the room blurring into a gray vignette. I realized then that I could not smell the gas because the heater was masking it. The purifier was sucking the air from the kitchen, heating it, and blasting it directly into my face, carrying something that was not just warm air, and if the stove valves had been tampered with, digitally opened just a fraction. Below the threshold of the audible hiss, but enough to fill a sealed room, I was sitting in a gas chamber. Panic, cold and primal, spiked through the fog in my brain. Felix. I fumbled for my phone. My fingers felt like sausages, clumsy and numb. I dropped it twice before I managed to unlock the screen. The numbers on the clock seemed to dance 7:45. He said he would be leaving. I hit his speed dial. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Pick up. Please pick up. The line connected. Felix, I croaked. My voice was slurred, sounding distant even to my own ears. Help, sick, air. Hello? It was not Felix. The voice was bright, loud, and surrounded by the roar of a party. House music thumped in the background, a heavy bass line that vibrated through the speaker. Felix! I tried again, louder. Oh, look who it is. Cassandra's voice pierced my eardrum. The birthday girl finally calls to wish us well. Cass, I gasped. Where is Felix? Put him on. Felix is a little busy right now. Sweetie, Cass said. Her voice was dripping with false honey, but underneath, I heard the steel. He is taking shots with the mayor. He is having such a good time. Finally let his hair down. I need help. I managed to get out. The room was getting darker. Gas. Can't breathe. You are so dramatic. Victoria, Cass sighed, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Always have to be the victim, right? Can't stand that tonight is about me. Just go to sleep. You sound drunk. Let me speak to my husband, I screamed, but it came out as a whisper. I think he is better off without your drama for one night, she said. Happy birthday, sissy. The line went dead. She had hung up. She had his phone. She knew. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. Sliding just out of reach. I needed air, oxygen. I looked at the window. It was 10 feet away. It might as well have been 10 miles. I rolled off the sofa. The impact with the floor jarred my teeth. But I didn't feel the pain. I only felt the heaviness. I began to crawl, drag, pull, gasp. My fingernails scrabbled against the wood. The room was pulsing in time with my heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. Click. The kitchen sound again. I reached the window. I reached up to the latch. My hand refused to close around it. My fingers were useless rubber. I slammed my palm against the glass, trying to break it, but I had no strength left. I slid down the wall, leaving a streak of sweat on the pane. The phone. I had to try the phone again. I dragged myself back toward where it had fallen. My vision was narrowing to a pinpoint. I was breathing in quick, shallow gasps, but the air felt empty. It fed nothing. I tapped the emergency button on the lock screen. SOS. 911. What is your emergency? Gas, I mumbled. Dying. Apartment 4B. Is this Victoria? The dispatcher asked. The question stopped me. Why did she know my name? Yes, I whispered. Ma'am, we have a note on your file, the dispatcher said. Her voice calm, patronizing, maddening. Your family called. They said you might be having an episode tonight. They told me reports said I'd been drinking and talking about harming myself. No, I sobbed, my face wet and burning. No, something's wrong. I need help. We're sending someone to check on you. Victoria, the dispatcher said, but try to breathe. There's no fire on record. Stay where you are. Stay where you are. Stay and hope. The phone slid from my fingers. I rested my cheek against the cool wooden floor. The soft blue glow from Cass's space heater shimmered in my vision, like a halo, or maybe a marker. This was really happening, on my 25th birthday, in sweatpants, a crumpled cupcake wrapper on the table. My sister's gift turning into a medical emergency, everything lined up too neatly. The timing, the explanation, the story they'd be ready to tell. Even the authorities had been nudged in advance. It felt deliberate, like being written out of your own life. The last thing I noticed was the strip of light beneath the front door. Then everything went black. What came next was chaos. A loud crash, wood cracking, shouts, heavy boots thudding across the floor. Close enough to feel, clear someone yelled. Air quality's bad. Get her out. Get the windows. Someone flipped me over. Hands were on my neck, searching for a pulse. She is in respiratory arrest. Bag her. Get the kit. A mask was pressed over my face. Air sweet, painful. Biting air was forced into my lungs. It hurt. It burned like fire. Look at the stove, a voice shouted. Valves are open, but no flame. It was rigged. Forget the investigation. We are losing her. Move. I was lifted. The world was a chaotic swirl of red lights and static. Then the darkness returned. Softer this time, pulling me under. When I woke up again, the room was still. It was not the emergency room anymore. I had been moved. I was in a private room. The lights dimmed to a low amber glow. The tube was gone from my throat, replaced by a nasal cannula. I blinked, waiting for the memory of the plastic taste to fade. My bedside table was empty. No flowers, no cards, just a pitcher of water and my personal effects in a clear plastic bag. My phone, inside the bag, began to buzz. I stared at it. It was not Felix. It was not my mother. The screen displayed a number I did not recognize. I reached out, my arm heavy and sore, and fished the phone out of the bag. I swiped green. Hello? My voice was a wreck, gravel and sandpaper. Victoria Hayes. It was a man's voice, deep, older, with the precise enunciation of someone who charged by the hour. Who is this? My name is Gideon Marsh, the man said. I am an attorney. I represent the private estate of Delilah Hartwell. I closed my eyes. My grandmother is she. She is alive, Gideon Marsh said, and she is much more aware than your family believes. I stayed silent, letting the words sink in. Victoria, he continued, his tone shifting from professional to urgent. I was instructed to call you only if a specific set of criteria were met. Tonight, the police report from your apartment triggered that clause. What clause? I whispered. The clause regarding an attempt on your life, he said. The air in the hospital room suddenly felt very cold. You need to meet me, Gideon Marsh said. Not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight, I am outside the hospital now. I have paperwork that your mother thinks she destroyed 10 years ago. And I have a recording your grandmother made the day before her stroke. Why? I asked. Why now? Because, the lawyer said, and I could hear the sound of a car door closing on his end. Your family thinks they just tried to kill a defenseless girl. They do not know they just activated a dead man's switch. You need to come downstairs, Mrs. Hayes, before they realize you survived and try to finish what they started. I lowered the phone. I looked at my reflection in the dark window of the hospital room. I looked pale. I looked like a ghost Good. If they wanted a ghost, I would be the most terrifying one they had ever seen. I pulled the IV tape off my hand. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. I am coming, I said to the empty room. The fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room hummed with a sound that felt like a drill boring directly into my temple. I sat in a vinyl chair that stuck to my skin. My hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Across from me sat the man I had promised to love, honor, and cherish. Felix looked like a ghost of himself. His tuxedo shirt was stained with sweat and the grime of a frantic drive. His eyes were red-rimmed, darting between the floor and my face, terrified to land on me for more than a second. "Tell me again," I said. My voice was raspy, the carbon monoxide burn still lingering in my throat like swallowed glass. "Tell me exactly what you said to the operator." "I told you." "Tori," Felix pleaded, his hands opening and closing in his lap. "I told them the sensors were screaming. I told them you were inside. I told them to break the door down." "The paramedic said the caller told them to take their time," I stated, watching his reaction closely. "He said the caller claimed I was drunk, that I was doing this for attention because I was jealous of Cassandra." Felix flinched as if I had struck him. "I never said that. I would never say that." "Someone did," I countered. "Someone who identified himself as Felix Whitmere, someone who knew our address, the gate code, and my medical history." Felix reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He unlocked it with trembling fingers and slid it across the low table toward me. "Look," he said. "Please, just look." I picked up the device. The screen was cracked in the corner. Likely from when he dropped it in his panic, I opened the call log. There was one outgoing call to emergency services at 7:42 in the evening. There was a flurry of missed calls from Cassandra and Lorraine starting at 8 o'clock, likely when they realized he had fled the party. But before 7:42, nothing. "They could have been deleted," I said, though my gut was starting to twist. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. "I called the carrier on the drive over," Felix said, his voice cracking. "I demanded the cloud logs. They are emailing them to me. It cannot be edited." As if summoned, his phone pinged with an email notification. I tapped it open. It was a PDF from the service provider. I scrolled down to the date. 7:42. That was the first and only call from this device to 911. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. The relief was instant, followed immediately by a surge of cold dread. If Felix didn't make the call that almost killed me, someone else did. Someone who sounded enough like him, or authoritative enough, to fool a dispatcher. "Who," I whispered, "who has enough of your information to impersonate you?" Felix rubbed his face with his hands. "I do not know." Identity theft. A hacker. "Think, Felix," I snapped. "They did not just have your name. They knew I was home alone. They knew about the party. They knew to frame it as a jealousy issue. That is not a hacker in a basement. That is personal." Felix froze. His eyes widened, fixing on a point on the wall behind me. "The papers," he murmured. "What papers?" "About 2 weeks ago," Felix began, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Your mother took me to lunch. She said she was overwhelmed with the paperwork for Delilah's care. She said the hospital needed verification of family support networks to approve the transfer to the rehabilitation center." I felt the blood drain from my face. "And she had a stack of forms," Felix confessed. "She said they needed to show that you had a stable home environment, financially and emotionally. She asked me to fill out a guardian support affidavit. It asked for everything. Tori, my social security number, my phone carrier PIN for verification, my mother's maiden name, even my voice verification phrase for the bank. And you gave it to her." I stared at him, horror rising in my chest. "She is your mother." Felix defended himself, though he looked sick. "She was crying. Tori, she said she was terrified the state would take Delilah away if our paperwork was not perfect. She said you were too fragile to handle the administrative load. So she came to me. Man to man," she said. Fragile. I repeated the word. It was the same word Cassandra had used in her voice note. It was the same word the husband on the phone had likely used to the dispatcher. She told me you were struggling, Felix said, tears finally spilling over his lashes. She told me you had episodes in college that you never told me about. She said you get paranoid when you feel abandoned. She made me promise to be gentle with you, to not indulge your fantasies of persecution. I sat back, the plastic chair creaking. It was brilliant. It was absolutely demonic. And it was brilliant. Lorraine hadn't just stolen his data. She had stolen his trust in his own wife. She had spent weeks planting seeds of doubt in Felix's mind, so that if I ever complained about the family, he would view it through the lens of my alleged instability. I believed her, Felix whispered, shame coloring his cheeks. For a moment, when the alarm went off, my first thought was not gas. My first thought was, is she doing this to get me to come home? That is why I hesitated for 30 seconds before calling, because she was in my head. He reached across the table and grabbed my hand. His grip was desperate. But I did call. Tori. As soon as I saw the smoke light. I didn't care if it was fake. I called. I drove 100 miles an hour. I am so sorry I let her in my head. I am so sorry. I looked at his hand covering mine. He was not the enemy. He was just another victim of the Hayes family distortion field. We need proof, I said, my voice steadying. We know they did it, but knowing it and proving it to a judge are two different things. A heavy set of doors swung open down the hall, and a man in a paramedic uniform walked toward us. It was Noah Briggs, the man who had looked at me with skepticism in the ER and then saved my life. He held a clipboard, his face grim. Mrs. Hayes, he said, nodding to me. He looked at Felix with a lingering suspicion, but addressed us both. I just finished filing the incident report with the fire marshal. There are things you need to know. We are listening, I said. The gas valve in your kitchen is a smart valve, Noah said. It is connected to your home network. It does not just turn with a knob. It can be adjusted via the app for precision cooking. The logs show it was open to 4% flow at 7:15, just enough to fill the space without triggering the explosive limit immediately. And the carbon monoxide detector? Felix asked. Disabled, Noah confirmed. But here's the kicker. The system logs every command. Usually, it just says user admin, but because the command came from an unrecognized device, the hub logged the IP address of the source. It is a security feature. Do you have the IP? I asked. I do. Noah tore a strip of paper from his clipboard. I am not a tech guy, but I know this does not look like a standard residential address. I took the paper, a string of numbers, 10.5, 5.1, 2.8, gateway WH _ EST _ GST. I know someone, Felix said. He was already typing on his phone. Lena Rourke. She does digital forensics for my firm. She owes me a favor. Call her, I commanded. Wake her up. 20 minutes later, we were huddled around Felix's phone on speaker. Lena Rourke's voice was crisp, alert, and devoid of small talk. I ran the trace on the IP and the gateway identifier you sent, Lena said. It is a localized network, not a public provider. Where is it? I asked. It is a commercial mesh network, Lena explained. Specifically, it is the guest Wi-Fi network for a venue called The Estate at Waverly Hills. The access point was identified as Ballroom North. The silence that fell over the waiting room was absolute. Waverly Hills, the estate. My mother's house, I whispered. The party. Wait, Felix said, leaning closer to the phone. Lena, are you sure? Could it be someone spoofing the location? Not on a mesh network like that, Lena replied. To get that specific gateway ID, the device had to be physically within range of the router. Someone was standing in that ballroom, connected to the Wi-Fi, and used your credentials to unlock the gas valve. I closed my eyes and the image flooded my mind. My mother, or Cassandra, or perhaps one of their minions, standing in a silk gown, holding a glass of vintage champagne. They would have smiled for a photo, tapped a screen, and sent a command that would turn my lungs to stone. It was not a crime of passion. It was a crime of convenience, executed between the appetizer and the main course. "Thank you, Lena," Felix said, his voice hard. "Save everything. Send me the certified logs." He hung up. He looked at me, and for the first time, the fear in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp fury that matched my own. "They tried to kill you while they were cutting the cake," he said. "Yes," I said, "and they used your name to cover the tracks." "I will destroy them," Felix said. It wasn't a scream. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the quiet intensity of a man who has realized his entire life was being managed by monsters. "Not yet," a voice came from the hallway entrance. We both turned. A man in a rumpled trench coat stood there, holding a leather briefcase that looked as old as he was. He had weary eyes but a jawline that suggested he enjoyed a fight. "Mr. Marsh?" I asked. "Gideon. Please," the lawyer said, walking over to us. He did not offer a handshake. He just pulled a chair over and sat down, creating a tight triangle of conspiracy. "I heard the last part," Gideon said, glancing at Felix's phone. "The IP address is a smoking gun, but a smoking gun is only useful if you do not shoot yourself in the foot with it." "They tried to murder my wife," Felix hissed. "We go to the police. We arrest them." "If you go to the police now," Gideon said calmly, "Lorraine will claim her phone was stolen. She will claim the Wi-Fi was hacked. She has the best defense attorneys in the state on retainer. They will drag this out for 5 years, during which they will paint Victoria as a paranoid, suicidal woman who framed her own family for attention. And they will win, because the burden of proof for attempted murder is incredibly high." "So we do nothing?" I asked, feeling the anger surge again. "No," Gideon smiled, and it was a terrifying expression. It was the smile of a wolf who knows the trap has already been sprung. "We do exactly what Delilah predicted we would need to do." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. "Your grandmother knew they would come for her money," Gideon said. "She knew they would try to sideline you. She suspected, in her darker moments, that they might even try to harm you to remove the obstacle." He tapped the document. "This is a revision to her living trust, executed 3 days before her stroke. It contains a bad actor clause. It states that if any beneficiary is found to have interfered with the medical care or physical safety of another beneficiary, specifically you, Victoria, their entire portion of the inheritance is forfeited immediately and redirected to a charity of your choice." "But we still have to prove it," Felix argued. "The standard of proof for a civil trust dispute is not beyond a reasonable doubt," Gideon said softly. "It is preponderance of the evidence, 51%, and we do not need to send them to jail to destroy them. We just need to take away the one thing they love more than themselves. Their money," I realized. "And their reputation," Gideon added, "because the clause requires the forfeiture to be public record." He looked at me. "But to make this stick, we need them to admit it, or at least, we need them to panic enough to make a mistake that we can record." "How?" I asked. "We invite them to a meeting," Gideon said. "We tell them Delilah has passed away." "She hasn't," I said quickly. "No," Gideon agreed. "But they don't know that. We tell them the will is being read. We get them in a room. We lay out the bait. And we wait for them to start eating each other." I looked at Felix. He nodded. "I want to see their faces," I said. "I want to see the moment they realize the ghost has come back to haunt them." "Then let us prepare," Gideon said, snapping his briefcase shut. "Because the performance begins tomorrow." The pieces were on the board: the 911 tape, the IP log, the imposter's details, and a husband who had finally woken up from the spell. My family thought they had written a tragedy. We were about to turn it into a courtroom thriller, and I couldn't wait to deliver the opening line. The office of Gideon Marsh was nothing like the sleek, glass and steel fortress that housed the Hayes family attorneys. It was located on the second floor of a brick building on Elm Street, directly above a used bookstore that smelled of vanilla and decaying paper. To get there, Felix and I had to climb a narrow, creaking staircase that felt like a secret passage. Inside, the space was cramped, lined floor to ceiling with legal texts that looked like they hadn't been moved since the Reagan administration. Gideon sat behind a massive oak desk, a fortress of files that seemed to be the only thing keeping chaos at bay. "Coffee," he offered, gesturing to a pot on a side table that looked as old as the furniture. "It is fresh. I brew a pot every time I prepare to ruin someone's life." "I am fine," I said, sitting in a leather chair that sighed under my weight. "I just want to see it." Felix sat next to me, his hand resting on my knee. He was still vibrating with the residual adrenaline from the hospital, his eyes scanning the room as if expecting my mother to jump out from behind a bookshelf. Gideon opened his briefcase, the battered leather one he had brought to the hospital, and pulled out a heavy cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with red wax, a dramatic flair that was quintessential Delilah. "Your grandmother came to me 6 months ago," Gideon began, his voice dropping into the smooth, practiced cadence of a man who narrated the law for a living. "She was lucid, she was angry, and she was terrified." "Terrified of what?" Felix asked. "Of being managed," Gideon said. "She had a habit of feigning sleep. You see, it is a trick old women learn when they want to know what their children really think of them. One afternoon, about 3 weeks before her stroke, she was resting in her sunroom. Lorraine and Cassandra were in the kitchen. They thought the door was closed. It was not." He pushed the envelope across the desk toward me. "She wrote this immediately after they left." I reached out and broke the seal. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness. I pulled out a single sheet of stationery. The handwriting was shaky, the loops of the L's and Y's trembling, but the message was clear. "My dearest Victoria, if you are reading this, then the vultures have started circling. I am sorry I was not strong enough to chase them off while I was here. I heard them. I heard them discussing how to handle you. They called you a liability. They said your share of the estate would be wasted because you are too emotional to manage wealth. They are planning to put my money into a trust controlled by Lorraine, with you receiving a stipend like a child on allowance. They think I am senile. They think I didn't notice how they talk over you, how they cut you out of photos, how they whisper that you are unstable to anyone who will listen. I noticed, and I have taken steps. Do not let them write your story. Burn the page. Love, Nana." I lowered the letter. The silence in the room was thick. "She knew," I whispered. "She knew everything," Gideon confirmed. He opened a blue folder. "This is the amended living trust of Delilah Hartwell. It supersedes all previous wills and testaments. It was notarized, witnessed by 2 independent parties, my paralegal and the bookstore owner downstairs, and filed with the county clerk the same day." He turned the document around so we could see the distribution chart. "The bulk of the estate," Gideon pointed a thick finger at the largest slice of the pie chart, "including the lake house on Briar Glen Road, the portfolio of municipal bonds, and the liquid savings, is left to a primary beneficiary." He looked at me. "You, Victoria." I stared at my name on the legal paper. Victoria Hayes, not Lorraine, not Cassandra, me. The lake house that was the only place I had ever felt safe. It was where Nana taught me to swim, where we hid from Lorraine's criticism during the summers. "There is a smaller bequest for Felix," Gideon added, nodding at my husband. $50,000, placed in a separate holding account. She did that specifically so it would not be commingled with marital assets. It is yours. Felix, not the couple's, yours, which means if Lorraine ever tries to sue for it, she has no standing." "I do not want the money," Felix said, his voice tight. "You will take it," Gideon said firmly, "because she wanted you to have the means to protect her granddaughter without asking anyone for permission. But here is the trap," Gideon said. Flipping to page 12, the text was dense, single-spaced legalese. "This is what we call a bad actor forfeiture clause, but Delilah called it the poison pill." He began to read aloud, his finger tracing the lines. "In the event that any family member, specifically Lorraine Hayes or Cassandra Hayes, is found by a preponderance of evidence to have interfered with the medical autonomy, physical safety, or reputation of the primary beneficiary Victoria Hayes for the purpose of challenging her competency or seizing control of the estate. Their contingent shares shall be immediately revoked. Gideon looked up. It goes on. Furthermore, if such interference is proven, the entirety of the assets designated for them will bypass the family line completely and be donated to the State of New York's Fund for Victims of Domestic Abuse. They lose everything, I said, the magnitude of it hitting me. If they try to prove I'm crazy to get control of the money, they lose the money. Exactly. Gideon leaned back. Steepling his fingers, Delilah built a paradox. To get the money, they need you to be incompetent. But the act of trying to prove you are incompetent, if done maliciously, disqualifies them from getting the money. But they do not know this exists, Felix realized. They think the old will is still valid, the one where Lorraine is the executor. Precisely, Gideon smiled. They are operating under the assumption that if they can just paint Victoria as suicidal or mentally unfit, Lorraine automatically gets power of attorney over her share. They are walking into a buzzsaw. Felix suddenly stood up and walked to the window. Looking down at the street, he was gripping the sill so hard his knuckles were white. The insurance, he muttered. What? I asked. Felix turned around. About 3 months ago, Lorraine came to me with that paperwork I told you about, but there was another policy she suggested. A supplemental life insurance policy for you. Victoria, she said since you work in a government building, it was high risk. She said she would pay the premiums as a gift. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty room. Did you sign it? I signed the application, Felix said, looking sick. But she handled the submission. She said she put me down as the beneficiary, but I never saw the final policy document. She said she filed it in the family safe. Gideon, I looked at the lawyer. Can we check? I already did, Gideon said. He pulled a thin sheet of paper from beneath the trust document. I ran a search on your Social Security number this morning. There is a policy active with Sentinel Life, face value $2 million. Who is the beneficiary? Felix asked, his voice barely a whisper. It is not you, Felix, Gideon said grimly. The beneficiary is the Victoria Hayes Special Needs Trust. Trustee Lorraine Hayes. The room spun. She bet against my life, I said. She took out a policy that pays out $2 million if I die, and she controls the payout. And if you do not die, Gideon added, but are declared mentally incompetent, say, after a tragic gas leak that caused brain damage, she controls the trust that receives the insurance money when you eventually do pass. It is a win-win for her. That is motive, Felix said. That is clear. Financial motive for attempted murder. It is, Gideon agreed. But we need to nail the lid shut. We need them to admit they knew what they were doing. He reached into the envelope one last time and pulled out a small, black USB drive. Delilah left one more thing, he said. She called it the trigger event file. She gave me strict instructions this drive was only to be accessed if you were hospitalized under suspicious circumstances. What is on it? I asked. I have not listened to it yet. Gideon said, but the label she wrote on it says, Kitchen Conversation, September 12th. I remembered September 12th. It was the day of the family barbecue. The last time I had seen Nana healthy. Play it, I commanded. Gideon plugged the drive into his laptop. He clicked a file. The sound of static filled the room, followed by the clinking of silverware and the background hum of a refrigerator. Then, voices, clear as a bell. She is becoming a problem. Mother, that was Lorraine. She is just quiet. Lorraine, leave her alone. That was Nana, sounding tired. It is not about being quiet, Cassandra's voice cut in. She is weird. She makes people uncomfortable. And honestly, if she gets the lake house, she is just going to let it rot. She doesn't have the money to maintain it. The house is mine to give, Nana snapped. For now, Lorraine said. Her voice was ice cold. But you know, Mother, people with Victoria's profile, they often have accidents. They spiral. It would be irresponsible of us not to be prepared to step in. If something happened to her, well, the estate would need a firm hand. "Are you threatening your daughter?" Nana asked, her voice rising. "I am protecting the family legacy," Lorraine replied, "by any means necessary." The recording ended with the sound of a door slamming. I sat there, frozen. They hadn't just plotted in secret, they had told her to her face, and that was why she had changed the will. That was why she had died, or had her stroke terrified for me. "This is enough," Gideon said, pulling the drive out. "We have the recording. We have the trust. We have the insurance fraud implications. Victoria, my advice as your attorney is to file this with the probate court tomorrow morning. We get a restraining order. We lock them out of the accounts. It is clean. It is safe." "Safe," I repeated. I thought about the gas filling my lungs. I thought about the stay home text. I thought of my sister laughing on the phone while I crawled across the floor. "If we file it now," I said, "they will settle. Their lawyers will hush it up. Lorraine will spin a story about how she was misunderstood and just trying to help. She will keep her social standing. She will keep her charity boards. She will still be the victim." "Yes," Gideon admitted. "That is likely, but you will be safe." "I do not want to be safe," I said, standing up. "I want to be the storm." I looked at Felix. "Do you trust me?" "With my life," he said without hesitation. "Good." I turned to Gideon. "Set up the meeting, but not here, not at a law office." "Where?" Gideon asked. "The hospital," I said. "In Nana's room. I want them to look at her while they lie." I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I dialed Cassandra. It rang twice. "Victoria." Her voice was cautious, guarded. She probably expected me to be in a coma, or at least sedated. "Cass," I said, forcing my voice to sound weak, trembling. "I need you to come to the hospital, all of you." "Why?" she asked sharply. "Is it Nana? Did she pass?" "No," I said. It is the lawyer. He says there are papers. He says there is a problem with the trust, and he knows about the accident last night." There was a pause, a long but heavy silence where I could practically hear her brain calculating the odds. "We will be there in an hour," Cass said. Her voice was no longer cautious. It was eager. She thought the lawyer was calling us in to tell us the estate was in limbo. She thought she was coming to collect the spoils of war. "Okay," I whispered. "Please hurry." I hung up. "They are coming," I told Gideon. "You are playing a dangerous game, Mrs. Hayes," Gideon warned, though there was a glint of admiration in his tired eyes. "I am not playing," I said, picking up the heavy envelope that contained my freedom and their destruction. "I am just reading the will." The Ash Grove Medical Pavilion at 7 in the evening was a study in liminal spaces. The daylight had faded, leaving the corridors bathed in a low, artificial hum of amber safety lights and the intermittent flash of nurse call buttons. It was a place suspended between life and death, the perfect neutral ground for an ambush. We arrived an hour early. Gideon Marsh, looking less like a lawyer and more like an undertaker in his dark suit, set up his briefcase on the small rolling table usually reserved for hospital meals. He arranged his papers with surgical precision: the trust document, the insurance policy, the USB drive. Each item was a landmine, and he was drawing the map. "Are you sure about the guests?" Gideon asked, glancing at the door. "A family meeting is one thing, a public forum is another. If I do this in private, they will lie about what happened," I said. Adjusting the collar of my shirt, I had chosen not to wear hospital scrubs or sweatpants. I wore a crisp white button-down and trousers. I wanted to look like the CEO of my own life, not the victim they expected. I need witnesses, not just us, people they can't pay off. I had invited Aunt Meredith and Uncle Jim Lorraine's older siblings who had been estranged from her for years due to her controlling nature. I had also asked Reverend Thomas, the chaplain who had baptized both Cass and me, to come pray for Nana. Lorraine would never dare cause a scene in front of a man of God. Felix was in the hallway, speaking in hushed tones into his phone. He was coordinating the second layer of the trap. "Noah is in the cafeteria," Felix whispered as he came back in. "He is off duty, but he is wearing his uniform. If we need him to verify the gas levels or the 911 call specifics, he is a 30-second elevator ride away." "And Lena?" I asked. "She sent the digital forensic package." Felix tapped his pocket. "Certified, time-stamped, and chain of custody verified. It is bulletproof. The login from the party, the IP address, the device ID, it is all there." I looked over at the bed. Nana lay there, small and still. The ventilator hissed rhythmically, whoosh, click, whoosh. Her face was pale, but peaceful. I walked over and took her hand. It was still cold, but as I squeezed it, I imagined I felt a faint resistance. "Showtime, Nana," I whispered. "Don't worry, I won't let them win." The monitor beeped steadily. Beep, beep, beep. 70 beats per minute. A calm, steady rhythm for a sleeping woman. At 7:15, the elevator doors down the hall chimed. I heard the click-clack of heels on the linoleum, fast, purposeful steps, the sound of someone who was not walking to a bedside, but marching to a podium. The door swung open. Lorraine entered first. She was wearing black, a sleek, designer dress that was appropriate for a funeral, but severe for a hospital visit. She had clearly come dressed for mourning, or perhaps she just wanted to visually reinforce the idea that tragedy was imminent. Cassandra followed, wearing a muted gray cashmere set, her face scrubbed of makeup to look properly distraught. Martin trailed behind them, looking like a man being marched to the gallows. Behind them came Aunt Meredith and Uncle Jim, looking confused but dutiful, and Reverend Thomas, clutching his Bible. Lorraine stopped short when she saw the crowd. Her eyes darted from the Reverend to Gideon, then to me. Her jaw tightened, a microscopic flinch that only I caught. "Victoria," she said, her voice smooth but edged with steel. "I didn't realize we were having a gathering. I thought this was a family discussion." "It is," I said, standing by the head of the bed. "Reverend Thomas is here to pray for Nana, and Aunt Meredith wanted to be here for the update on her condition." "And him?" Lorraine gestured a manicured hand at Gideon. "Mr. Marsh is Nana's attorney," I said. "He has news." Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "Mother's attorney is Arthur Vance. Who is this?" "I am the attorney she hired when she realized Arthur Vance was taking your calls instead of hers," Gideon said pleasantly. Not looking up from his papers, the air in the room seemed to vanish. Lorraine stiffened. Cass stepped forward, slipping instantly into her role. "Tori," she said, her voice trembling. She rushed over and enveloped me in a hug. She smelled of expensive vanilla and the faint, metallic scent of hairspray. "Oh my God, look at you. You look exhausted. Are you okay?" "We were so worried when we heard about the accident." She squeezed me. It looked like affection to the room. To me, it felt like a restraint. "I am fine, Cass," I said, not hugging her back. "Better than expected, actually." "We heard it was a gas leak," Lorraine interjected, moving to the center of the room, naturally assuming the position of authority. "Terrible. Simply terrible. I told Felix years ago that apartment building was a fire trap. But we can discuss your housing later, right now. We need to be practical about Mother." She turned to the group, her face arranging itself into a mask of sorrow. "The doctors say there has been no improvement," Lorraine announced. Though no doctor was present, we have to face the hard truth. Keeping her on machines, it is not what she would have wanted. It is cruel, and the cost to the estate is bleeding the family dry. "Lorraine," Aunt Meredith spoke up from the corner. "She has only been like this for 5 weeks. People wake up. We have to be realists." "Meredith," Lorraine snapped, then softened her tone. "We have to protect the future. For the girls." I looked at the monitor. Beep, beep, beep. "I think Nana can hear us," I said quietly. "Oh, Victoria. Please." Cass sighed, wiping a non-existent tear. Don't start with the spiritual stuff. It is medical science. She is gone. Beep, beep, beep. The rhythm on the monitor shifted. It sped up. 75, 80. I looked at Nana's face. Her eyelids didn't flutter, but the machine didn't lie. Her heart was reacting to the tension in the room. She was in there, and she was listening. Mr. Marsh, Lorraine turned her attention to Gideon. I assume you are here to facilitate the transfer of the medical proxy, since Victoria is clearly incapacitated after her ordeal last night. I am prepared to sign the papers to take over responsibility. Actually, Gideon stood up. He was a tall man, and in the small room, his presence was imposing. I am not here to transfer anything. I am here to execute a new directive. New directive, Martin spoke up for the first time. His voice hoarse. Delilah Hartwell updated her living trust shortly before her stroke. Gideon announced. She left specific instructions that this document was to be read in the presence of her full family and legal counsel, should any questions regarding her care arise. That is impossible, Lorraine said, her composure cracking slightly. I have her will. It is in my safe. That will is dated 2019, Gideon said. This one is dated 5 weeks ago. He held up the blue folder. I am going to read the key provisions, Gideon said, and I must ask that no one interrupt. There are conditions attached to this trust that are quite sensitive. I object to this, Lorraine said loudly. She took a step toward the table. This is absurd. You are some ambulance chaser Victoria dug up to create drama. I am the next of kin. I demand to see that document. You will see it, Gideon said calmly. After I read it. No! Lorraine's voice rose to a shout, startling Reverend Thomas. I will not have this charade in front of my dying mother Victoria. Tell him to stop. You are making a scene, as usual. I am not doing anything, Mom, I said, my voice steady. I am just listening. You are unstable. Lorraine pointed a finger at me, the mask finally slipping. You almost killed yourself last night because you were jealous of your sister's party. And now you are dragging us into this fantasy because you can't stand not being the center of attention. The room went dead silent. Aunt Meredith gasped. Felix stepped forward, his body tense, ready to intervene. I didn't try to kill myself, I said, looking Lorraine dead in the eye. That is what the police said, Cass cried out, jumping in to support her mother. They said you were drunk. They said you gassed yourself. Did they? I asked. Or is that just what someone told them to say? Lorraine glared at me. Her eyes were hard, calculating beads of glass. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that I wasn't cowering, I wasn't crying, I was standing my ground. Read the document, I said to Gideon. I forbid it, Lorraine shouted. She reached for the folder on the table. Felix moved faster. He stepped between Lorraine and the table, blocking her path. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a wall. Let him read, Lorraine, Felix said. His voice was low, dangerous. Get out of my way, Felix, Lorraine hissed. You are just as pathetic as she is. Enabler. Read it, Felix commanded Gideon. Gideon opened the folder. The sound of the paper crinkling was the only noise in the room aside from the frantic beeping of the monitor. Beep, 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 beep. 100 beats per minute. Nana was practically running a marathon in her bed. I, Delilah Hartwell, being of sound mind and body, Gideon began. Lorraine was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked at Cass. Cass looked at the door, as if calculating an exit route. I slipped my hand into my pocket. I felt the cool metal of my phone. I pressed the record button on the voice memo app. They thought this was a battle for money. They didn't realize it was an autopsy of their crimes. And the patient was still awake to hear the verdict. This is it, I thought. Welcome to the show. Gideon Marsh did not clear his throat. He did not look for dramatic effect. He simply began to read the text of the amendment with the dry, monotone precision of a man who knew that the words themselves were violent enough to require no embellishment. I, Delilah Hartwell, hereby revoke all prior bequests to my daughter, Lorraine Hayes, and my granddaughter, Cassandra Hayes, due to a sustained pattern of emotional manipulation and concerns regarding their intentions toward my estate. They are effectively disinherited. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, sucking the air out of the room like a vacuum. The entirety of the estate, Gideon continued, flipping a page, including the property at Briarglen Road, the investment portfolio, and all personal effects, shall pass to the sole primary beneficiary, Victoria Hayes. Lorraine did not scream. She did not lunge. Instead, she went perfectly, terrifyingly still. The color drained from her face, leaving her makeup standing out like war paint on a corpse. It was Cassandra who broke. "That is fake," she shrieked, jumping up from her chair. The gray cashmere cardigan slipped off her shoulder. "That is a forgery. Nana would never do that. You wrote that yourself." "The document is notarized," Gideon said calmly, looking over his spectacles, "and witnessed by two independent parties who have no stake in this family's drama." "It is coercion," Lorraine said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the small hospital room. She turned to look at me, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it felt like radiation. "You forced her. You whispered poison in her ear while you were changing her sheets. You took advantage of a senile old woman." "She was not senile," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline hammering against my ribs. "And I did not have to whisper anything. She saw you, Mother. She saw all of us." "We are contesting this," Lorraine snapped. Turning back to Gideon, "I will have this tied up in probate for 10 years. You will never see a dime. Victoria, I will spend every cent of the estate on legal fees before I let you have the lake house." "You could try," Gideon said, leaning back, "but you might want to hear the forfeiture clause first." "I do not care about your clauses," Lorraine shouted. "This is fraud." "It is not fraud," I interrupted. I walked over to the small table and picked up the first piece of evidence Gideon had prepared. "But we do have evidence of fraud, and attempted murder." "Excuse me," Uncle Jim spoke up from the back of the room. He looked between me and his sister, his face pale. "Victoria, those are heavy words." "They are heavy facts, Uncle Jim," I said. I held up the transcript of the emergency call. "Last night, at 7:35 in the evening, a call was made to emergency services," I said. Looking directly at Felix, the caller identified himself as Felix Whitmere. He told the dispatcher I was drunk. He told them I was staging a suicide attempt for attention. He told them not to hurry. "Felix," Lorraine scoffed, crossing her arms, "I always knew you were cold. But this—" "It was not Felix," I said. I nodded to the door. Felix opened it. Noah Briggs, the paramedic who had saved my life less than 24 hours ago, stepped into the room. He was in his uniform, and his presence shifted the energy in the room instantly. This was not a family squabble anymore. This was official. "I was the lead responder," Noah said. His voice was deep, authoritative. "I reviewed the audio logs this morning. The voice on the first call was male, but it was not the man standing right there," he pointed at Felix. "The cadence was wrong, the terminology was wrong, and frankly, it sounded like someone trying to lower their pitch. It was a performance." "So someone prank called 911, Lorraine said dismissively. "Probably one of Victoria's online friends. She attracts drama." "We traced the call," I said. "Or rather, we traced the other digital footprint left at the exact same time." I picked up the report Lena Rourke had compiled. The thick stack of paper landed on the table with a heavy thud. "At 7:15, someone accessed my smart home hub," I said. "They disabled the carbon monoxide detector. They opened the gas valve in my kitchen. They turned the HVAC system to recirculate to ensure the gas stayed in the apartment." I opened the file to the page with the highlighted map. The login did not come from a hacker in Russia, I said. It came from a device connected to a specific Wi-Fi network. I looked at Cassandra. She was chewing her lips so hard I thought it might bleed. The IP address resolves to the Ballroom North guest network at the estate at Waverly Hills, I said. The login happened exactly when you were all cutting the cake. Someone at that party used Felix's stolen credentials to try to kill me. Lorraine laughed. It was a brittle, jagged sound. This is ridiculous, she said, waving her hand as if swatting away a fly. You are saying one of us stood in the middle of a black tie gala and hacked your house. You are paranoid. Victoria, just like the police said, you set this up. You probably gave your password to someone just to frame us. She turned on Felix, her eyes narrowing. It is him, she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at my husband. Look at him. He is the one who controls her. He is the one who wants the money. He probably set it up to look like us so he could isolate her. He is abusing her, and you are all too blind to see it. It was a classic Lorraine pivot. When cornered, attack the support system, make the victim look helpless. Felix stepped forward. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I expected you to say that, Lorraine, Felix said. His voice was cold, devoid of the deference he had shown her for 5 years. Because you have been setting me up for months. He unfolded the paper. It was a photocopy of the life insurance application. You told me this was a guardian support affidavit, Felix said, holding it up for the room to see. You told me it was to help Delilah, but it is a $2 million life insurance policy on Victoria. He pointed to the bottom of the page. That is my signature, Felix said, but look closely. He passed the paper to Uncle Jim. Jim, who owned a contracting business and dealt with contracts daily, squinted at the page. The pixelation is off, Jim muttered. This signature, it has a background shadow. It was scanned and pasted. It is not wet ink. And the beneficiary, Felix continued, staring at Lorraine. It is not me. It is the Victoria Hayes Special Needs Trust. Trustee Lorraine Hayes. You took out insurance on her life, Felix said, his voice rising. And then you stole my identity to try to collect on it. I was protecting her, Lorraine shouted, her composure finally shattering. She is incapable of managing herself if she died. That money would have gone to waste. I was ensuring the family legacy survived her incompetence. You just admitted it, Gideon said softly. You admitted you took out the policy. Lorraine clamped her mouth shut, realizing she had walked into the trap, but the damage was done. Then came the final blow. I reached into the bag at my feet and pulled out the evidence bag containing the EtherFlow air purifier. I set it on the table. It looked innocent, sleek and modern. Cass, I said. My sister flinched. She looked at the device like it was a bomb. You sent this to me, I said. A peace offering. You said it would help me sleep. It is just a heater, Cass stammered. I bought it online. I didn't know. Uncle Jim, I said, you install HVAC systems. You know these units. Look at the back. I turned the device around. The casing had been pried open and clumsily glued back shut. Uncle Jim stepped forward. He put on his reading glasses and peered through the plastic casing where the filter should have been. The oxygen sensor wire, Jim said, his voice confused. It is cut, and the intake someone taped over the external intake vent. If you ran this in a closed room, it would recirculate the existing air. Noah Briggs finished the sentence from the doorway. And if there was a gas leak, this machine would heat the gas, making it rise faster and masking the smell with the scent of burning dust. It is not a heater, it is an accelerant. Uncle Jim looked up at Cassandra. His face was a mixture of horror and disbelief. Cassie, you gave this to your sister. Cassandra looked around the room. She saw the disgust on Uncle Jim's face. She saw the stone-faced judgment of the Reverend. She saw the legal trap Gideon had clamped around them. She panicked. I didn't mean to, Cass cried out. She rushed toward me, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time, born of terror. She grabbed my arms, her fingers digging into my flesh. "Tori, please, you have to believe me," she sobbed. "I didn't want to send it. She made me. She said it was just to make you sick. She said you needed a scare so you would check yourself into the clinic." "Cassandra," Lorraine screamed. "Shut your mouth." "I am not going to jail for you," Cass yelled back, spinning around to face our mother. "You said it was safe. You said the levels were low. You said she would just pass out and we would find her." "Imbecile." Lorraine lunged at her, grabbing Cass by the arm and shaking her. "You weak, pathetic little fool. You have ruined everything I told you to keep your mouth shut." "Get off her," Felix stepped in, pulling Lorraine back. "You have ruined us," Lorraine spat, her face twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. "I did everything for this family. I carried the weight, while your father did nothing. I managed the money, I kept up appearances. And this ungrateful, broken girl was going to throw it all away on a lake house she can't even afford to heat." She turned to me, breathing heavily. "You think you won?" she sneered. "You are nobody. Victoria, you are a shadow. You don't have the spine to run this estate. You need me. You have always needed me." Beep, beep, beep. The sound from the monitor changed. It wasn't just faster. It was irregular. Movement. "Nana," I whispered. I looked at the bed. Delilah Hartwell's hand, which had been resting limply on the sheet, was now a fist. Her knuckles were white. The room went deathly silent. Even Lorraine froze, her mouth half open. Slowly, painfully, Nana turned her head. Her eyes, usually clouded with the fog of the stroke, were open, and they were fixed directly on Lorraine. She didn't speak. She couldn't. But the look in her eyes was louder than any scream. It was a look of absolute, crushing disappointment. "She heard you," I said softly. "She heard every word." Lorraine took a step back, her hand going to her throat. "Mother, I was upset. I didn't mean—" "She heard you 5 weeks ago. 2. Gideon said. He reached for his laptop. "This is the final exhibit," Gideon announced. "An audio file recorded by Delilah Hartwell on September 12th. He pressed play. The sound of my mother's voice filled the hospital room, tinny but unmistakable. "We have to deem her incompetent. Cass, it is the only way. If she has an accident, something that looks like a suicide attempt, the courts will give me guardianship. We can put her in that facility upstate, the one with the long-term wing. She will be out of the way, and the trust will revert to my control." Then Cassandra's voice, laughing. "God, she is such a burden. Just make sure it looks real. Mom, I do not want to deal with the police." "Leave it to me," Lorraine's voice on the recording said. "By her 25th birthday, Victoria will be a memory." The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Reverend Thomas had covered his mouth with his hand. Uncle Jim was looking at his sister as if he was seeing a monster. Martin, my father, had sunk into a chair, his head in his hands. Lorraine stood in the center of the room. She looked small now, the grand matriarch, the power broker, the puppet master. She had been stripped naked in front of the very audience she had tried to manipulate. "It seems," Gideon said, closing his folder with a final snap, "that the preponderance of evidence has been met." I looked at my mother. I didn't feel the triumph I expected. I didn't feel joy. I just felt a deep, profound exhaustion and the clarity of a severing tie. "Get out," I said. Lorraine blinked. "Victoria, listen." "Get out," I repeated, my voice rising. "Get out of my room. Get out of my life. And pray that the police get to you before I file the civil suit, because I am going to take everything, the house, the money, the reputation. I am going to leave you with exactly what you tried to leave me." I pointed to the door. "Nothing." Lorraine looked at Martin. "Martin, are you going to let her talk to me like that?" My father looked up. For the first time in my life, he looked at his wife with clear eyes. "Go, Lorraine," he whispered. "Just go." Lorraine straightened her back. She smoothed her dress. She tried to summon the old arrogance, but it was gone, fractured beyond repair. "You will regret this," she said to me, but her voice shook. She turned and walked out the door, her heels clicking on the linoleum, but the rhythm was uneven. She was fleeing. Cassandra stood there, sobbing. "Tori." "You too," I said coldly. "Take your heater and go." Cassandra grabbed her purse and ran after her mother. The door swung shut. The room was quiet again, save for the steady, reassuring beep of the monitor. Beep, beep, beep. I turned to the bed. I squeezed Nana's hand, and this time, weak and trembling, she squeezed back. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It wasn't an explosion. It was a slow, agonizing crumble, like watching a mansion slide off a cliff in slow motion. The morning after the hospital confrontation, I walked into the Waverly Hills Police Precinct. I wasn't alone. I had Felix on my left, Gideon Marsh on my right, and Noah Briggs behind me. We didn't look like a family. We looked like a strike team. I placed the evidence on the desk of Detective Miller, the certified digital forensic report from Lena Rourke, the audio recording of the 911 call, the tampered air purifier still in its evidence bag, and the affidavit from Uncle Jim. "This is not a domestic dispute," I told the detective, my voice flat and hard. "This is attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and identity theft. I want charges filed." Detective Miller, a man who had likely spent his career breaking up bar fights and writing traffic tickets, looked at the stack of documents. He looked at the names involved: Hayes, Whitmere, Hartwell. These were names that usually appeared on donor plaques, not arrest warrants. "We will investigate, Mrs. Hayes," he said, but his tone was different this time. There was no condescension, no "calm down, sweetheart." He saw the legal firepower flanking me, and he knew the game had changed. By noon, the first domino fell. Cassandra was escorted out of her office at Premier Public Relations. It wasn't an arrest, not yet. It was an administrative suspension. News of the incident at the hospital had leaked, likely thanks to Aunt Meredith, who had never been able to keep a secret in her life. The rumor mill in Waverly Hills churned faster than any news cycle. The story wasn't clear, but the key words were devastating attempted murder, inheritance fraud, forgery. A client had called the firm asking if it was true that their vice president was under investigation for poisoning her sister. In the world of PR, perception is reality. Cass was toxic before she even hit the sidewalk. 3 days later, Lorraine was removed from the board of the Waverly Hills Charity League. She didn't go quietly. I heard from a friend that she had stormed into the meeting, demanding to know who had spread vicious lies about her family. But the chairwoman had simply handed her a printout of the police blotter, which now listed an active investigation into the Hayes residence, and asked her to leave. Lorraine had built her castle on the foundation of social standing. We were pulling the bricks out one by one. Felix and I moved out of our apartment. We couldn't stay there. The air still smelled like a phantom memory of gas, and every time the heater clicked on, I flinched. We packed our essentials and drove 2 hours north to the lake house on Briar Glen Road. It was a small cabin compared to the estates in Waverly Hills, but to me, it was a fortress. It smelled of pine needles and old wood smoke. We spent the first night sleeping on a mattress on the floor of the living room, listening to the wind howl off the water. "Are you okay?" Felix asked me, watching the firelight dance on the ceiling. "No," I admitted, "but I am free." My father, Martin, drove up to see us a week later. He looked smaller, somehow. He sat at the kitchen table, turning a mug of coffee in his hands, unable to meet my eyes. "I didn't know about the gas," he said quietly. "I swear, Victoria. I knew they were planning something legal. Lorraine talked about the competency hearing constantly, but I didn't know they would try to hurt you physically." "But you knew they were trying to declare me incompetent," I said. "And you said nothing." "I was scared," Martin confessed. It was a pathetic admission from a grown man, but it was honest. "Lorraine, she consumes people. Victoria, she eats them whole. I thought if I just kept my head down, she would leave me alone. I thought you were strong enough to handle it. You always seemed so independent." "I was independent because I had no choice," I said. "You let them bully me for 25 years because it was easier than fighting her." Martin nodded, tears leaking from his eyes. "I know, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. I am moving into a hotel. I can't stay in that house with her, not after hearing that recording." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. I let him finish his coffee. But I didn't hug him when he left. Lorraine, however, did not retreat. She counterattacked. 2 weeks into the investigation, posts started appearing on local community forums and social media groups. They were written by anonymous friends or burner accounts, but the voice was unmistakable. It is so sad what greed does to families. Heard the victim in the Hayes case actually staged the whole thing to extort her dying grandmother. Does anyone else find it suspicious that the daughter with a history of mental instability suddenly has a new will, leaving her everything elder abuse is real? She was trying to flip the narrative. She was painting me as the villain, the unstable, greedy daughter who had manipulated a stroke victim and framed her saintly mother. I sat at the kitchen table in the lake house, reading the comments. People were believing it. "Oh, I always thought Victoria was a bit odd. Poor Lorraine. She has done so much for this town." "Don't reply," Felix warned, taking the iPad from my hands. "That is what she wants. She wants a flame war. She wants you to look emotional." "I am not going to reply," I said, opening my laptop. "I am going to release the data. I didn't write a long, tearful post. I didn't use adjectives. I created a simple, sterile website. On it, I uploaded the timeline, Exhibit A, the 911 call log. Caller ID spoofed, Exhibit B, the digital forensics report. Login, origin, Waverly Hills. Estate, Exhibit C, the audio analysis of the husband, caller voice mismatch. Exhibit D, the trust amendment, dated and notarized. I posted the link with a single caption: "The truth does not need adjectives. It just needs evidence." The effect was instantaneous. The internet detectives of Waverly Hills pounced on the documents. They cross-referenced the IP addresses. They analyzed the timestamps. Within 48 hours, the tide turned. The poor Lorraine comments vanished, replaced by shock and disgust. Then came the twist that sealed the court of public opinion. A woman named Jessica, a former sorority sister of Cassandra's who had fallen out of her circle, commented on one of the threads. I didn't want to get involved, but I can't stay quiet anymore. 2 days before the birthday party, I had drinks with Cass. She was stressed about money. She told me, "Don't worry. My sister problem is about to solve itself. Mom has a permanent fix." I thought she meant rehab. Now I know what she meant. She had tagged the Detective Miller in her comment. It was hearsay, yes, but in the court of reputation, it was a death sentence, and to the police, it was a witness statement that corroborated premeditation. Amidst the chaos, a miracle happened in the quiet of Ashgrove Medical Pavilion. Nana woke up. It wasn't a sudden, cinematic awakening. It was slow. Her speech was slurred, her left side weak, but her mind that sharp, steel trap of a mind was intact. I went to see her. The nurses had banned Lorraine and Cass from the floor, citing the active police investigation. For the first time in my life, I had her all to myself. I sat by her bed, holding her hand. I told her everything. I told her about the gas, the party, the lawyer, the fallout. I told her I was scared that I had destroyed the family. Nana looked at me. Her eyes were clear, blue and fierce. "You didn't destroy anything, Victoria," she whispered, each word a struggle but distinct. "You just turned on the lights. The rot was already there." She squeezed my hand. "Con," she said, using the Vietnamese term of endearment she had picked up from her travels years ago. "You are not crazy. You never were. You were just being written by people who needed a villain to justify their own sins. You were characters in their play. but the play is over. I am not crazy, I repeated, the tears finally falling. They were just writing my life for me. Write your own now, Nana said, and make it a bestseller. The district attorney announced the charges a month later. Lorraine Hayes and Cassandra Hayes were indicted for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and tampering with evidence. It was a victory. But as Gideon Marsh warned us, an indictment is not a conviction. Lorraine has hired Clayton Vance, Gideon told us over the phone. He is the most expensive defense attorney in the state. His nickname is the Shark. He is not going to argue the facts. He is going to put you on trial. Victoria, he is going to try to prove that you are so unstable, so manipulative, that you could have faked the digital evidence yourself. Let him try, I said. He has a strategy, Gideon warned. He is going to claim that the trigger event recording the one where they plotted in the kitchen was illegally obtained and therefore inadmissible. Without that recording, the intent is harder to prove. It becomes circumstantial. But we have the witness, I said. Jessica. Jessica is a character witness, Gideon said. Vance will tear her apart. He will say she is a jealous ex-friend. So it comes down to the trial, Felix said. It does, Gideon agreed. And Lorraine is saving something. Vance filed a motion yesterday to introduce special medical evidence regarding your psychological history. I don't know what it is yet, but they are confident. I hung up the phone. I looked out at the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the gray sky. Lorraine wasn't done. She had one more weapon, one more secret from my past, or a fabrication so convincing it could sway a jury. I wasn't afraid. I had survived the gas. I had survived the isolation. I had survived the realization that my mother wanted me dead. I turned to Felix. Get the car, I said. We have a trial to prepare for. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, I was the one holding the pen, and I was ready to write the final chapter in blood if I had to. The courtroom smelled of lemon floor wax and stale adrenaline. It was a sensory detail I had not expected. I thought justice would smell like old books or marble, but instead, it smelled like a hospital corridor that had been scrubbed to hide a stain. My mother, Lorraine Hayes, sat at the defense table wearing a suit of soft, creamy white. It was a calculated choice. She looked like a dove, or a saint. Certainly not a woman who had tried to asphyxiate her daughter for a trust fund. Next to her, my twin sister Cassandra wore gray, her head bowed, playing the role of the reluctant accomplice to perfection. The trial had dragged on for 3 weeks. We were now in the closing stages of the prosecution's case, and the air in the room was so tight it felt like it might snap. Lorraine's defense attorney, a shark named Clayton Vance with teeth that seemed too white to be real, had spent the morning trying to dismantle my life. He did not attack the evidence of the gas or the Wi-Fi logs directly. Instead, he attacked the victim. Ms. Hayes, Vance said, pacing in front of the witness stand where I sat. Is it not true that you have a history of what your family calls episodes? That you often feel persecuted? That you once locked yourself in a bathroom for 3 hours because you thought your sister was laughing at you? I was 12, I said, my voice steady, and she was laughing at me. She had just cut the hair off my favorite doll. So you hold grudges, Vance smiled. Turning to the jury, you hold on to small slights and blow them out of proportion. Is it possible, Ms. Hayes, that this entire conspiracy is just another manifestation of your desire to punish your family for perceived insults? Attempted murder is not a perceived insult, I replied. And carbon monoxide does not care about my childhood. Vance didn't like that. He moved to strike my comment, but the damage was done. The jury, 7 men and 5 women, were watching Lorraine, not me. Then came the pivot I had not expected. Lorraine, realizing the Victoria is crazy defense was not landing hard enough, threw her own daughter to the wolves. During the cross-examination of the lead detective, Vance suggested that perhaps Cassandra acted alone. He painted a picture of a jealous twin sister, drowning in debt, who acted without her mother's knowledge to secure her inheritance. I saw Cass flinch in the defendant's chair. She looked at our mother, wide-eyed. Lorraine stared straight ahead, her profile calm and stony. That was the moment the alliance broke. When the defense rested, Cassandra's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client wishes to change her plea and provide testimony." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Lorraine finally turned her head, her eyes narrowing into slits. Cass took the stand. She was shaking. This wasn't the polished PR executive anymore. This was a terrified girl realizing she was about to be the fall guy. "I did buy the heater," Cass admitted, her voice trembling. "And I did send it, but I didn't know how to rig it. I'm not good with mechanics. Mom Lorraine, she took it to a specialist. She told me it was just going to make Victoria sick. She said we needed a medical event to force the power of attorney transfer." "So you were acting under instruction?" the prosecutor asked. "I did everything she told me," Cass sobbed. "She controls my bank accounts. She controls my job. She said if I didn't help her, she would cut me off and tell my husband about some debts I had." It was a compelling performance, but it wasn't enough. It was still he said, she said. Lorraine's lawyer immediately pounced on cross-examination, painting Cass as a desperate liar trying to reduce her own sentence. Then they came for Felix. Vance called my husband to the stand as a hostile witness. He tried to spin the narrative that Felix was the mastermind, that Felix had manipulated me, faked the evidence, and framed the family to seize the lake house for himself. "You stood to gain $50,000 immediately upon Mrs. Hartwell's death under the new trust. Did you not?" Vance asked, leaning on the railing. "Yes, but I didn't know that until after the attempt," Felix said, his jaw tight. "So you say," Vance sneered. "But isn't it true that you have always resented how the Hayes family treated you? Isn't this the ultimate revenge, stealing their fortune and their freedom?" "I don't want their money," Felix said. "I want my wife to be safe." "Safety is a convenient excuse for greed." Vance dismissed him. The jury looked conflicted. Lorraine's narrative was muddying the waters. She was creating enough doubt to perhaps hang the jury. If they couldn't be sure who was the architect, they might acquit Lorraine and only convict Cass on the lesser charge. That was when the district attorney, a sharp woman named Reynolds, stood up. "The people call Noah Briggs back to the stand," she announced. Noah walked up, looking solid and unimpeachable in his dress uniform. "Mr. Briggs," Reynolds said, "you testified earlier about the 911 call made by the imposter husband. You stated the voice was male, but the cadence felt performed. Can you elaborate?" "I have listened to that tape 500 times," Noah said. "There is a specific breathing pattern. The caller takes a sharp, audible inhale before every sentence. It is a distinctive speech tick." Reynolds walked to the evidence table. "I would like to introduce People's Exhibit G. This is a voicemail left on the defendant Lorraine Hayes' office line, which she inadvertently forwarded to her insurance broker 2 years ago." She played the tape. It was Lorraine leaving a message for a contractor, screaming about a billing error. Sharp inhale. "I will not pay this." Sharp inhale. "Do you know who I am?" Sharp inhale. "I will ruin you." The courtroom was silent. The inhale was identical. "It is a stress response," Noah explained. "When the subject is acting or angry, she gasps. The husband on the call did the exact same thing. It wasn't a man. It was a woman pitching her voice down. But she couldn't hide her breath." Lorraine shifted in her seat. Her composure was cracking. "But we have more than breath." "D.A., Reynolds said. "We have the motive." She projected a document onto the court screen. "This is the application for the Sentinel life insurance policy," Reynolds declared. "The defense claims Mrs. Hayes was simply a concerned mother, but we subpoenaed the bank records of the defendant." She pointed to a highlighted line. 3 days before the birthday party, 3 days before the gas leak, Lorraine Hayes wired the first premium payment of $12,000 to Sentinel Life. She paid for an expedited review. Reynolds turned to the jury. "She didn't just buy insurance. She bet on the date of death. You do not pay for expedited processing on a life insurance policy unless you expect a claim to be filed very, Very soon. Lorraine stood up. I was being efficient, she shouted. Sit down, Ms. Hayes, the judge barked. And finally, Reynolds said, ignoring the outburst, we have one last witness. She could not travel here today due to her health, but she has provided a sworn video deposition, recorded yesterday in the presence of the court clerk. The lights dimmed, the large screen descended, and there was Delilah Hartwell. She was sitting in her wheelchair at the lake house, a blanket over her lap. She looked frail, her face thinner than before, but her eyes were burning with a fierce, blue fire. State your name, the off-screen clerk said. Delilah Marie Hartwell, Nana said. Her voice was slow, the stroke having stolen her speed but not her clarity. Mrs. Hartwell, did you ever hear your daughter, Lorraine Hayes, discuss your granddaughter Victoria's death? Yes, Nana said. Can you tell us exactly what you heard? Nana looked directly into the camera lens. It felt like she was looking right at Lorraine across the miles and through the screen. It was in my kitchen, Nana said. September 12th. Lorraine was drinking wine. She told Cassandra that the legal route was taking too long. She said, Nana paused, taking a breath. She said, I do not need her to be crazy. I just need her gone before the old woman signs the new will. If she dies before Delilah, the money flows up to me. The courtroom erupted. Objection, Vance screamed. Hearsay. It is a statement against interest heard by a direct witness, Reynolds shouted back. She called me the old woman, Nana continued on the video, her voice cutting through the chaos. She looked at me, thinking I was asleep, and she smiled. It was the smile of a butcher looking at a lamb. The video cut to black. The judge hammered his gavel, demanding order. But it was over. I looked at the jury. They weren't looking at Lorraine with doubt anymore. They were looking at her with revulsion. The deliberation took less than 4 hours. When the jury returned, the foreman, a mechanic with grease-stained hands, did not look at the defense table. We find the defendant, Lorraine Hayes, guilty on all counts. He read, conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, insurance fraud, identity theft. We find the defendant, Cassandra Hayes, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder in the second degree. Lorraine didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply froze, like a statue that had finally realized it was made of sand. Cassandra collapsed onto the table, sobbing loudly, a sound of pure, selfish misery. The judge set the sentencing hearing for next month, but he revoked bail immediately. These defendants have substantial means and have proven they are willing to manipulate evidence, the judge said. Remand them to custody. The bailiff moved in with the handcuffs. I watched as they pulled Lorraine's hands behind her back, the sleek white suit wrinkled. She looked at me, her eyes wide, searching for something sympathy, perhaps, or a final chance to manipulate. As they led her out, she stopped near the aisle where I was standing. Victoria, she said. Her voice was urgent, desperate. I did it for the family. You have to understand. I am a victim of this too. The pressure, you don't know what it is like. The courtroom went quiet. Everyone waited for me to scream, to slap her, to finally unleash the 25 years of rage I had stored in my heart. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me and then tried to erase me because I didn't fit her aesthetic. No, I said softly. Victoria, please, she whispered. Tell them I am your mother. I stepped closer, close enough that she could see the life in my eyes, the life she tried to snuff out. You are not a victim. Mother, I said, and you don't get to take my story anymore. The pen is mine now. I turned my back on her. Take her away, I told the bailiff. I walked out of the courtroom and into the sunlight. Felix was waiting for me. He took my hand, and for the first time in months, I took a deep breath of air that tasted only of freedom. 6 months later, the sun was setting over Briar Glen Lake, painting the water in shades of violet and gold. The air smelled of barbecue smoke and pine needles. We were sitting on the deck of the lake house. It wasn't a grand party, There was no tent, no hired DJ, no press release. There was just a long wooden table covered in a checkered cloth. Felix was manning the grill, flipping burgers. Uncle Jim was laughing with Noah Briggs, who had become a regular fixture at our Sunday dinners. Gideon Marsh was there, too, looking relaxed without a tie, arguing playfully with Aunt Meredith about the best way to marinate chicken. And at the head of the table sat Nana. She was in her wheelchair, a blanket over her knees, but she was smiling. She was holding a glass of iced tea, watching the fireflies beginning to blink in the tall grass. "Happy birthday," Felix said, setting a plate down in front of me. It was a cupcake, a single vanilla cupcake with pink frosting, just like the one I had bought for myself on that lonely morning, but this one had a sparkler in it. "Make a wish," Nana said, her voice raspy but warm. I looked around the table. I looked at the people who had stood by me when the world was dark. I looked at the house that was now legally mine, a sanctuary that no one could ever take away. I thought about Lorraine and Cassandra, sitting in their cells, living in a world of gray concrete and rigid schedules. They had wanted to control everything, and now they controlled nothing. It was a punishment more fitting than any I could have devised. I had used the first disbursement from the trust to start the Delilah Hartwell Foundation. We provided legal aid and emergency housing for victims of financial abuse and domestic coercion. We were helping people rewrite their own stories before it was too late. I looked at the sparkler fizzing and popping, casting bright little stars onto the wooden deck. "I don't have a wish," I said, smiling at my husband. "I have everything I need." I blew out the sparkler. The smoke drifted up into the cool evening air. Harmless and sweet. They had tried to make me a ghost. Instead, I had become the author, and this was the best ending I could have ever written. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment down below where you are tuning in from. I would love to connect with you all, and do not forget to subscribe to Juliet Revenge Stories. Like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.